The Business Owners Podcast is brought to you by Business, Business, Business and Enovar Group with your hosts, Linda Reed Enovar and Clive Enovar. In each episode, we talk to other business owners about their experiences, challenges and successes. We'll also share tips and advice on how to grow your business and achieve your goals. If you're a business owner or you're thinking about starting a business, then the Business Owners Podcast is for you.
Hi everyone, I'm Linda Reed Enovar and welcome back to another episode of the Business Owners Podcast. I am so excited about today's episode. We have Sandy Breece joining us, and Sandy, like me, is an ex-teacher and she loves to do things, but she's still most probably a current teacher because she runs her own school. And we're talking today about the power of community and also some of the mistakes that both Clive and myself and Sandy have learnt along the way about maybe not using our communities to our full extent. And for those of you who are tuning in for the first time, Clive and I run a community called Business, Business, Business with 32,000 members. I would like to say hello to Sandy.
Hi, everyone. Glad to be here.
So glad to have you. And Clive, would you like to say hi to everyone today and welcome everyone to the podcast?
Yes, indeed. Welcome. And I'm delighted to be speaking with Sandy because she's all about education, and that's what business is all about. If we spend more time educating people who are our customers, we're going to have better businesses. Looking forward to this immensely.
This is going to be a great episode. Sandy, would you like to take a moment, please, and introduce yourself to our community? Let them know a little bit about you, and so that we can get to understand the journey you've taken to understand the power of community.
Absolutely. I'd be glad to do that. I'm Dr. Sandy Breece. I have a doctorate in educational leadership, and I am excited about education. I've always been excited about education. But what I found long ago when I started as a young teacher and then had a baby of my own that grew up to be quite a challenge, and I found that I needed some good advice from my educator friends. And the more I asked their advice, the more advice I got, naturally. And teachers are that way anyway. They clam together and share ideas and so forth. But I had what's called a kinesthetic learner, and that's one of three modalities of learning. There's children that are visual learners with their eyes, auditory learners with their ears, but my son was a hands-on learner, and he still is a hands-on learner at age 46 now. So it is his personality. He's a hands-on learner. But I saw it at a very young age that he needed assistance in project kinds of learning centers and project-based education, not just for the visual and the auditory, but for doing things. And so I saw that over and over again. And fortunately for me and for him, I was his kindergarten teacher because I taught kindergarten for 27 years. Do you believe that?
That's an achievement.
Believing it, but I did. And at the time when I was teaching kindergarten, I was lucky enough to have him in my class. And he, like his other classmates, some were visual, some were auditory, but there's very rare kinesthetic learners around, and he was definitely a kinesthetic learner and needed to have project-based kinds of educational kinds of program where you could weave the reading and the math and weave the science and the social studies and the art and the music all into it at once with different projects. And so I was passionate about that. And when he left kindergarten and went on to the other grades of my very capable colleagues that I worked with, he was struggling, very much struggling. And so I was worried. I was a worried mom. I can't help it. I was a single mom too, which made it even more difficult. So I was concerned because he was different and he learned by projects and learned with his hands and doing things. He tended to be one that stood out in a classroom. And oftentimes other children would be cruel and bullies and all the bullying things that happen in school. And so he caught a lot of that flack. And even though I can remember his sympathetic teachers and principals that were trying to help him get through it. And the more I thought about it, I thought, gee, I could do this. I did do it in kindergarten with him. But as he grew and he kept getting closer to those dreadful middle school years, the ones that just don't know whether they want to be grown up or stay little, they have such trouble deciding that when they get to middle school. Some go through it, breeze through it easily, but A kinesthetic learner does have issues oftentimes. And I made a promise to myself that I would make a decision about how I could help him educationally, some way, somehow, by the time he got to middle school. And I said that to myself when he was a third grader. Again, I thought about it. And finally, I just couldn't, what was happening to him every day constantly reminded me that I needed to take a stand and do this. So when I made the decision to do it, I went to my friends and my colleagues thinking they would be supportive and excited. And I told them I wanted to start a school for kinesthetic learners. Isn't that a great idea? And they went, "What? You can't do that. Think of a liability. That won't work." Well, they said awful things to me, and I was disappointed, but I couldn't forget it. I couldn't leave the passion on the sidewalk and walk away. I had to move forward with it. So I took a different strategy. Instead of telling the world about it, I decided I'd select community members who might be interested or might be positive about thinking about it with me. So I put a tiny little classified ad in the
Yeah, I
old
know them.
newspaper. Remember the old way? No social media back then. So I put that little ad in the paper anonymously, asking if there were other parents out there that were worried about their middle schoolers getting ready to start school, and if they had concerns, that give me a call. I may have a plan that may help you. And so I put my phone number in there, but not my name, because I still had a job with the school system. So I had to
Exactly.
be careful. So I did get calls. People did call me back, and I would ask them questions about their child that they were worried about. And if they answered in a kinesthetic way, that what their child needed, and I got the sense of where their problems were with their child, I could tell that it was probably a kinesthetic learner. So then I would share with them that I was planning to start a school for kinesthetic learners. And believe it or not, I gathered my first class of 9 students,
Well
nine
done.
students way back then. This was 34 years ago. 9 students to join my classroom, which I had in a downstairs bedroom area. They used to call them mother-in-law units of my two-story duplex. And I started it there. And it was a private school because there was no such thing as charter schools then, 34 years ago. And
Wow.
yeah, they hadn't started yet. There were no such thing as homeschooling. You never dare do that. Although I did think about it a while, and it took off. And not only did it take off for kinesthetic learners, because I called my school hands-on learning because I was so in love with the idea
Yeah.
of it being just for kinesthetic learners. But then by the second year, I had parents of visual learners, parents of auditory learners who wanted in. They were pounding on the door. They wanted to have their kids part of this small class size program. So I went to my community, which were the parents of my students. They were the people that I shared with and helped me put this together because they wanted it for their kids too. So all those parents of those kinesthetic learners, only 9 of them, and my son was one of them. And so I told them, we have to think about this because if we want the school to grow, and we have to be more flexible and to begin to share it with auditory, visual learners to join us. And then we're going to have to change the name. We can't call it hands-on learning if we're going to open it up to visual and auditory learners. They said they'd help me think about a name, and they were okay with that. So I marched forward to do that. And that very day that I made that announcement to them, one of the dads of one of my students called me up and he says, "Sandy, I've got the perfect name for the school." And I said, "You do?" And he says, "Yeah." And he says, "Telesis, call it Telesis." And I said, "Telesis? I don't even know what that word means." And he said, "Oh, it's doing better, getting better." But then he said, "It's just so marketable," he said. I'll never forget him saying that. Just so marketable. And I said, "Okay, let me think about it for a while." And so he said, "Okay." We hung up. And then I had the brainy idea to look it up the old-fashioned way in the dictionary. Remember those things?
I
I
do.
opened up the dictionary, and sure enough, right there with a lowercase t was the word telesis, as he was calling it. I read that it was about bringing things to completion, doing them right, bringing things to fruition. Different dictionaries say different things, but you look it up, it's in your dictionary. It's a word derived from Greek. And I thought, I don't know about this. I didn't think, this isn't going to work. But then I noticed he was saying it wrong. He was mispronouncing it. The word that he was calling telesis was really pronounced telesis. And it is derived from Greek, and it means completion, planned progress. And the more I thought about it, hands-on learning, that's exactly what we were doing. We were bringing kids to completion and planning their progress for their future lives through project-based education. So that's what I did. I changed the name to Telesis, and today we have a thriving school from preschool through a high school graduation and everything in between, graduations every year, and a very thriving community of parents that support us and community members that support us.
I love where you've come from in this journey. And the thing as an ex-teacher, and I'm now a homeschooling parent. I have been since my daughter was in year 9. She's in year 11 right now, and she's taking on the world of university while she studies from home. But the thing that you've just brought up to this process and this area is project-based learning. We don't do anything in the world of business that isn't a damn project, that doesn't need the multiple skill sets and the multiple learning styles involved in it. Everything's a project. This podcast is a project. Now, Clive and I'll talk to you, we'll have the conversation, but I've got a handy team of people who will edit it and who will chop the bits up and make it, and then we've got a team that will market it. And that all requires a different learning style and a different skill set.
It does. I've seen project education work so well, it would be hard for me to turn away from it. But I know what you're talking about. And there's some people that will never get it. But then there's others that will really open up. And the kids always get it. They really are sucked in right away. They love it.
I find in the school system here, especially when we get young people in the business and that sort of stuff, who have gone and they've gone for the academics and the academics only. We've got to teach them the life components, the life skill components of part of that project.
I think exploring all kinds of opportunities is a good idea, but I don't like to box myself in or my kids. I like to give them choices, let them choose. It's like when they talk about feeding an infant, that eventually he might eat 5 bananas one day, but the next day he might have a lot of oranges. Eventually it works out that if you give them some leeway, they will make good choices. I'm not suggesting that you just stand back and let them tumble off of a balcony like my 6-year-old son did one time, almost, because they're exploring. I think you need to provide the opportunities to be there for them to explore and to learn from the world, because the world can be a classroom too.
Absolutely.
Indeed, and it reminds me that we need to keep our minds wide open, and particularly it reminds me of Confucius, who allegedly said, I hear and I forget. I see and I remember. I do and I understand.
Boy, I'm a believer in that too. That Confucius quote from long ago. It's so true. And I'm also a big fan of Jean Piaget, who's a Swiss psychologist. And he also believed in project-based instruction, and so that we could open up the world and let the world help be the teacher. There's just so many opportunities that are lost when we put kids in a classroom sometimes, not all classrooms, but sometimes, that are just stagnating in reading the lesson. Don't go out of the lines, folks. Stay right there. And it's sad. It's almost heart-wrenching. And it didn't work for my son. And we tried, believe me, and I had quality teachers. They were people that really cared, but they were just boxed into the system. And there's just so much more opportunities out there. And I'm not saying that a good teacher with a program, a reading program or a science program that they're committed to can't do well with that. But boy, when they use that program to open it up and provide other opportunities such as projects, it really comes to life and makes it so much better.
Yes, I would say that to teachers that are listening. One of the reasons I don't teach is project-based teaching was definitely my style of teaching. And I got into the system here in Australia in the late 90s. And I was told by many other teachers who I loved and admired that I was 10 years too late. I was never going to be able to teach project-based. I would have to teach to the system. And I went, I'm not going to be that person. I can't do that to our kids.
They get around, huh?
Yeah, exactly. They do. They're like, here's your box. And I'm like, I was never the box kid to begin with. What makes you think I'm going to follow the box now inside that space? I've heard you mention the word community a number of times today, and community to me is a huge thing when we do things. And both Clive and I run communities of a large scale and inner circle communities. I've got my ideas, impact, and marketing circle community. Clive's got his business wisdom vault where we're unlocking our knowledge and we're letting people explore it, like we've been talking about here today. The big thing that I would say, I want to ask you this question. Because what was the difference of asking your community a question than asking your friends and family? Because I tell my clients half the time to never ask their friends and family because they're either biased or they're going to give a horribly protective idea. What was the difference when you asked the question of a community versus your friends and family?
Oh, a huge difference. And my friends and family wanted to be supportive. My family was definitely supportive, but my friends were, because they shared the same profession that I had, they were putting themselves in my place. And I think they were being protective in a way. I think they meant well, but they didn't know how badly I wanted to do this. So what I made the decision to do is, instead of telling lots of people, I began to very selectively choose the people I told, and chose usually just one to try and glean some advice from them over a certain problem or obstacle that was preventing me to do the next step in what I wanted to do to make the school grow and become more relevant to what I needed to do. And when I did that, I got lots of good reception. The third year of operation, when I started my school, I say we because I'm a big collaborator. So the people that I hired, I collaborated with them and they became shared leadership and we were all working at it together. So we were at a stalemate with one thing, we wanted to grow. I started the school in a downstairs 2-story duplex, and I wanted to move the students to the upstairs so I could grow in that building. But I knew I had to get permission to do that from the city, from the fire department. 2 months before the third year was to begin, I called up the fire department, and I had some friends there, so I said, I want to expand the school. We're doing so well. We need more classrooms. We need more teachers. I'm prepared to move out of the upstairs duplex where I lived and make that part of the school if I can bring the kids upstairs. And so they sent this fire inspector out. He looked at the building. He looked it all over and he said, I don't see a problem at this at all. And it was so easy. It was almost easier than I thought. He was the fire inspector, not me. So he said it was absolutely fine. I could go ahead with my plans. I had 2 months to get ready and I hired more teachers. I enrolled more students and lots of different students. And then when I got those two tasks done, I went to work with my community helping me. Those are the parents of the students that I had in my first initial class of only 9 students. And they helped me get the materials, paint the walls, change the area so it didn't look like a home anymore. It looked like a school. And then just 10 days before the school year was to start, I get this phone call from the fire chief, not the fire inspector, the fire chief. And I knew him too. And he said, Sandy, I'm so sorry. I go, what are you going to tell me? He said, we have a new fire inspector and he shouldn't have given you approval. You have to have fire escapes on that second floor before we can let you take kids up there. And I said, oh, what am I going to do? And he says, I'm just so sorry. He just kept apologizing. So we hung up, and my first reaction was to push the panic button and scream in a pillow. But pretty soon, self-control kicked in, and I decided I would call a contractor in our town who was a friend, who I trusted, and he was very well liked, very popular. I knew he would have some good advice. He might tell me, don't even try. I didn't know what he was going to say, but I called him up, and I told him privately, just me talking to him, what my dilemma was. And school was going to start in 10 days. I had new teachers I had hired. I had new students that had enrolled. If we don't have the space to put them, what am I going to do? So he listened quietly. I didn't know my heart was beating so hard. And he just listened and he says, give me about a couple of hours and I'll call you back. he calls and asks if his business partner would help him if he decided to take this task on of getting these 2 fire escapes on my building before 10 days went by. After his partner said yes, then he called an architect that was new to town, a young architect, because he knew he had to have an architecture stamp on the plan before they could get a building permit from the city. Those are all things I didn't even think of. So he knew that had to be in place. Then he called me back and said, I've got an architect that's going to stamp our plan. I've got my business partner's going to help me. We'll start Monday morning after we get our city permit. So that's what they did. They went down and got their city permit and they started it. And that was then only 7 days, 1 week before school was to start. And I watched them turn windows into doors on the second floor and put fire escapes off both sides of the 2-story building. And they did it. And the morning of the first day of school, I had an early morning meeting with the fire department, and the parents and the students were all waiting outside wondering if I was going to open or not. And sure enough, they gave me this full stamp of approval for our up to code fire escapes. The committee went out the back door, out the fire escape, and the kids came in the front door to their teachers waiting for them, and it worked. So I was a believer of the power of community then, let me tell you, for sure. That's why I wrote this book with my friends. We wrote a book about community, and it's on Amazon. Anyone can get it. It's about community stories, but chapter 3 is all about my school and how all of that story and other stories all came together.
I'm particularly impressed that Sandy spent time figuring out who she might talk to who would not try and keep her in her box. People who might have like desires, similar goals, and similar needs. And that's something I think we miss a lot in business. We try and talk to everybody. And of course, that leads to frustration, as you've just explained.
Yes.
Whereas if we can identify who we can work with and speak to those people, then we have an opportunity of a match. So community in that regard is extremely important, and it moves things ever so much more quickly. So as your community grew, Sandy, are you still in the 2-story duplex?
Believe it or not, we are still using that 2-story duplex today, only now it's our business offices. Those classrooms that were a little bit too small, those classrooms which were bedrooms and dens and living rooms, which do not exist anymore, they're all classroom offices for our admin team, our principal, our registrar, and we have now 350 students, kindergarten through 12th grade, not in that building, but we've expanded into the surrounding territory, and we've expanded in a good way. We have now 17 classrooms, a gymnasium, a cafeteria. So all of that has grown over the last 34 years. So it's been an amazing journey, and I would love to share my passion with anyone out there that's considering starting a school.
And with that size of school, is that now run just by you and the people who wanted that, or is the state now involved?
What happened is we operated privately for 7 years, and about 5 years into that 7-year period, charter schools started to roll west. That had started in the eastern part of the nation and rolled west. When it finally got to Arizona, where my school is in Lake Havasu, when it finally got there, I thought, is this going to help us or going to hurt us? We weren't sure. And so we watched. But I had a friend, again, another community member, that I talked to privately, not with a group of people, but privately. And I suggested, could we piggyback on your school that you have as a charter school and try it out and see if it's going to work for us? And he said, yeah, we can make that work. And I found out later, of course, he was as receptive to the idea. He got to count my numbers. So of course he was excited, but I didn't know that at the time. I thought he was doing me a huge favor, and he really was doing me a huge favor. It was really me that suggested it. And so he did that, and we joined him. And for the next 2 years, tuition went away for the parents of my students. They thought it was Christmas time, and we became part of his charter school just for that 2-year period. That was in 1998. And in the year 2000, I applied for my own charter, and I got it. And we've been a charter school ever since, a public charter school, no tuition, nonprofit, and it's working very well for everyone.
Well
Fantastic.
done.
What a story. Okay. So I would love to know. I'm a Thinkific approved expert for those who are tuning in who don't know when I talk about this. And I talk about different learning styles. And part of what I actually teach when I teach course creators, Sandy, is I teach them to teach to their course to the kinesthetic learner because they'll tap in on the auditory and the visual learner by teaching to the kinesthetic style anyway.
Good for you.
And in the world of online learning, there's a thing called a social learner that's coming into our list of things that are being out there. The ones who want to learn with someone or they want the accompaniment inside that space. So I see a lot of people start a school. Okay, they start a school online. They could be like Clive and I myself. We've got a business academy, and we're just about to start here in Australia launch our Youngpreneurs Library with think tank sessions and those sorts of things for young entrepreneurs coming through that journey. Now, you and I have the education background, but you don't need it really to start a school. But what would your advice be to someone who is wanting to start?
It's funny that you should bring that up because I can tell you I've known lots of really good teachers. I've had the good fortune to have them as teachers for me and my own education, and teachers that I've worked with, and teachers that I admire and know from a distance. So I had a lot of experience with that. And I can tell you that there's a lot of people out there that are in the workaday world that jump out at me as, wow, wouldn't they be fantastic in a classroom? And the beauty of what I've done with my school called telesis, which is a Greek word that means planned progress, is I've been able to use the opportunity that the state gives me to hire people with college degrees but aren't necessarily educators. So I've found some of the best teachers in flower shops, in grocery stores, in libraries. I reached out to the public who individually who have a degree. They do have to have a degree, of course, as first in order to work at a public school. But they don't have necessarily in Arizona. It may be different in other states. I haven't researched that yet. But in Arizona, they don't necessarily have to have an educator's certificate. It can be a college degree and a passion to teach. And it's that passion part that's the most exciting part to me. And that's the people I have worked with. And those are a lot of the people I have hired. Some of them are certified teachers, but others are right out of the general public and working hard at like in flower shops or libraries or businesses of some kind, and they just have the yen to teach. They just want to do it. And I've been very successful at that. So some of the best teachers I have hired have come from other places than from college classrooms becoming an educator.
Okay, so to all our listeners out there that are frustrated with people not knowing how to do things within their industry or the bad people doing
That's
it,
right.
or those sorts of things, this is your call to teach. This is your call to get out there and run your own school and teach and do all of those sorts of things.
There's times when I really think good teachers are just born. You can develop teaching, but it sure helps if you've got some kind of a natural that you stumble onto ever so often.
Fantastic. Clive, have you got a couple of questions for Sandy? I know there's
Yes,
most probably some in your head.
very often for a person starting a business, there are little things that they trip over. And if they trip over these little things often enough, they tend to give up. Sandy might be able to provide us with 3 things that she noticed along her journey that allow people starting a business to overcome the little obstacles, actually avoid them altogether, just by focusing on getting 3 things right.
I can tell you that one year, about 25 years ago, I couldn't find a science teacher, and we were getting ready to add high school to our school. And you have to have a science teacher. And I found some science teachers, but they were far away from Arizona, and either they didn't want to move, or they couldn't find a place to live, or they couldn't afford to move, whatever that problem was. So that complicated the process as well. So I was really in a stuck spot. I didn't know what to do. And one of my community members suggested, it was a community member, it wasn't anybody on my staff, it was a community member that said, have you ever tried a job search agency that works to find others so they can fill your job openings? And I said, No, I never even thought of that. So I looked one up, and sure enough, I found an education agency that looks for teachers in this case in other places. And I found an agency that had a whole cadre of teachers that they interviewed in the country of India. And I thought, oh, this isn't going to work. But I was desperate. I'll just try it. I was trying not to be preconceived ideas or not letting anything goof it up. And I promised the person that advised me to do it that I would give it a try. So I went ahead and I had them send me, remember the old CDs of a CD that they sent me in the mail, and I played that CD, and I picked out one teacher that really struck me. She was just very calm and had a calm demeanor about her, and also she spoke perfect English. It was very clear, because if she was going to teach science for me, I needed the kids to be able to understand her, right? And some of the interviews, it was difficult to understand them, but she was just crystal clear. So they put me on an international telephone line with her to do the interview. That was such a joke. But no, there were no cell phones back then. We didn't have any other way to talk. There wasn't Zoom. We couldn't do that. So we talked on an international scratchy line. I could hardly hear her. She could hardly hear me, she told me later. But we did the best we could. And something just felt right. I can't explain it. It just was meant to be. I didn't have anybody else. I was up in a corner, but it just felt right. I didn't have buyer's remorse afterwards. I didn't feel like, oh, I made a huge mistake. I felt real confident about it. I was hoping and praying I was right. So she arrived for teacher orientation on the first day, and I had taught my returning staff how to say, "Welcome to America, welcome to Telesis," in Hindi, her native language. And when she arrived, she was all dressed in her native attire, a sari, and she was very shy. And we said that to her, and she started to cry. I thought, oh my gosh, I've really ruined it now. But they were happy tears because she was so touched by what we did. She had left her 2 daughters and her husband behind in India because she wasn't sure if this was going to work. But it did work. She not only was a fantastic science teacher, later in a few years, I was able to ask her to take the position of Dean of Students and Data Analysis Director. And she did that. And she's still doing it today at my school. She's fantastic. The second year she was there, she brought her family to America, and her husband was a wonderful accountant for us. And also her 2 daughters, who were in the 3rd grade and 5th grade, they were wonderful. And they grew up as became valedictorians of their classes, and they were just fantastic. One is a medical doctor today, and the other one is a software engineer for General Motors. So they became totally successful. Just one of the many success stories that we've had at our school. And she's still with us. I see her every day. And man, what a good decision that was. Best decision I ever made. She told me later that they made a mistake. She really applied as a math teacher, but they accidentally put her in interviews that were science. I would have never seen her video ever if the company hadn't made that mistake and put her in the wrong group of teachers. Because she wasn't planning to teach science, but she didn't tell anybody that. She wasn't going to tell me that. She wanted to admit us to work too. So it was a miracle, in my opinion. I can't call it a happy accident. It was a miracle.
So sometimes stepping outside your comfort zone opens up
That's right.
opportunities you would otherwise miss.
Yes, and I also had a whatever it takes kind of attitude. Whatever it takes to keep this school going, I'm going to do it. As long as it's not illegal and against the law, I'm going to do it for sure.
Very good. And what about a tip for somebody else who might be looking at starting something, but if particularly it happened to be a school, what might that you have learned that might make their journey somewhat less difficult?
The first thing is they need to strap on their seatbelt and have the attitude of whatever it takes and keep their dream prevalent in their mind and always thinking about what's best for the students and make decisions on the basis of that. And don't let the naysayers destroy the dream, because so many people I know that have gone out after this, now that I've been on the other side looking back on it, and know others that have tried to do the same thing, they quit because they get scared, or their parents or their teachers or their friends say, "Are you crazy? Don't do that." Baloney. They need to keep after their dream and don't give up. We've had hurdles and monstrous mountains to climb that we've overcome, and we're still alive and we're still doing great and growing and going. And now it's become the fodder of funny stories to think about. But it was painful at the time, but it turned out to have a happy ending. And there's lots to be learned. I would have to say no two stories are the same. They're all different. So what problems that they bump into, they need to just push through it. Don't give up on your dream. Keep the faith and keep on keeping on.
Whilst you're keeping on and you're still going and you're still achieving,
Yes.
most of all, of course, you're turning loose on society and on community, well-rounded, well-educated students.
Absolutely. We've had some fantastic success stories. I can't even tell you the thousands of children that have passed through our school. They've gone on and to graduate, or they've come to our school and then their parents move away. I've said to many parents, "Gosh, do you really have to move? Can't you just leave your kids here?" Because I don't want to lose their kids. But ultimately, they tell me they have to take their kids. So they do. But the kids that we've touched and impact, and then they come back and they tell me. They come back and after they've joined the military or they've gone to college or they've moved to another state when they were in junior high and they moved to another state, and I didn't get to see them until they came back and told me how much of a difference we made for that part of their education. So even when they're not here with us the whole 12 years, and it's amazing how many students we have had now that have gone all the way from kindergarten to high school graduation at our school. They're totally telluses, I say. That's what I tell them. You're totally telluses. It's all good.
I think what we've just heard there, guys, too, is the fact that you can make an impact on someone's life through the business or the service that you offer with just the smallest touch. It doesn't have to be through completion. And inside the online course creation world and inside the online education world, and even working with us as coaches, like with Clive and I, say, you'll hit a stage where you've got the answers. You can continue with us, but you maybe don't need to. And your students will have that component, especially when we're talking about self-paced learning, where they've got the answer that they were looking for in that course. They go off and continue in their life, and they might come back to it at some stage in time. But it does ebb and flow.
You summarized that very well. Thank you very much.
We asked some questions, Sandy, of everyone who attends our podcast, and these are just fun questions that allow us to get to know you a little bit more. So the first question we ask is, are you a morning person or a night person?
Oh, I'm a night person. I said that quickly, didn't I? Yeah, I'm definitely an owl, a night owl, and I do my best work. I sometimes have the best ideas in my dreams, and I wake up and I start working on it then. It's funny, I'm definitely a night person, but the world doesn't have midnight school, not many times. I guess there is such a thing as night school, but it just doesn't work that way for children. So I've become a morning person reluctantly, but I've done it. So I make that work. But when my best ideas are, I used to say my heart doesn't start beating till lunchtime. I've made myself a morning person, but I'm really in disguise. I'm really a night person.
It's fantastic. I understand. I'm a morning person, so I work morning. Clive, what about you? We haven't asked you this question on the podcast yet.
I totally understand. I got lots of friends that are morning people.
Clive, we've not asked you on the podcast yet. Morning or night person?
I'm actually an all-day person.
That's really been better. Learn to come that kind.
Doesn't that stretch you way too far to be in your zone?
No, I'm what they call a high-energy person, which when I was younger, I used to find fault with because I thought I'm not as energetic as my outwardly bouncy friend over here or anything like that. But it turns out that they were right, because high energy means that you maintain it over a longer period of time, not that you're an Energizer bunny, shall we say.
That's good.
Nothing wrong with us Energizer bunnies, by the way.
Nothing wrong with it, any of them, really.
It's all good. Okay, other one comes to it. Now, I'm a coffee person. Tea or coffee or something else?
Oh, I'm not either. Sorry, I'm not. I'm really hot chocolate. Does that count?
It does count.
I get my caffeine fix from chocolate. I'm a chocolate.
Fantastic.
I admit it.
So question, in the hot chocolate, marshmallows or not marshmallows?
Oh, marshmallows. Yes, absolutely. I'll settle for whipped cream though, too.
I love it. Okay, fantastic. Now, Who's one person that you admire and you look up to?
I'm a big fan of Jean Piaget. He was a Swiss psychologist that really believed in education like I see it, that it needs to be project oriented and learning from the environment and not helping to read it in a book. And I'm not dissing on books. I'm a reading teacher. I believe in books, but you can't box people or students into a book only and not let them explore, because whatever's in the book is going to stick a lot more up here if they're doing it. And that's my philosophy, and that's certainly what Mr. Piaget thought when he was doing all of his research, is
He
that
did.
that needs to be happening.
And they're still teaching Piaget in psychology. My daughter's just done a couple of units through university, and Piaget came up in
Yes.
the first.
Yes, he
First
left
component.
mark. He made his point.
He did make his path, and he's definitely worth looking into inside that space.
Into my mind is a lady by the name of Marva Collins. In the 40s and 50s, she had a school in Harlem, New York, in this deep inner city, and she gathered up the community's children and started her own school. And a lot of what she was about is definitely where I'm at as well, as far as education goes.
Fantastic. And if you could holiday, where would you holiday to?
Oh gosh, let me think. I love Europe. I've been to Europe a couple of times and I could go back anytime. I'm planning a trip coming up here in just about a month to Japan. And I have never been to Japan, so I'm looking forward to that. I love to go to Australia. That sounds like a perfect place to go. The animals and all of that appeal to me, and I'm into all of that. So I grow where I'm planted, to borrow a phrase. I bloom best when I'm planted in where I can explore and be part of the neighborhood. So
I love that.
I really love to travel. I just got back from Canada.
Fantastic.
That was fun.
Clive, have you got one final question for Sandy today before we wrap up our podcast?
One tip, Sandy, for anybody who's starting out or alternatively has been going a while and needs to take that next step but has maybe been suggested to by his or her friends and family that, oh, it's too hard.
I got it for you. It's called the 3 C's. There are 3 C's. The first C is courage. You've got to have courage. Don't let the naysayers talk you out of that. You've got to be courageous, and courage has to be your middle name, okay? The second C is compassion. You have to have compassion, not only for your students, but for yourself. If you make a mistake, just pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start over again. It's not a travesty. Anything can be fixed. Anything can get better. Just be compassion. You've got to have compassion for your students, but also for yourself. And you'll attract good teachers that way too. And then the last C is collaboration. I'm a really good collaborator. I think I can say that proudly, because it doesn't mean that I don't know the answer. It means that I'm looking for better answers in every way and support for my answers. So I don't have to have all the answers. I just need to be able to collaborate and help others to build a relationship with them to collaborate with me, and not be afraid to share the leadership. That's really important, because teachers have great ideas, and if you put a lid on it, you're never going to know. You got to open up the lid and let the good stuff come out. And so collaboration would be the third C. Courage, compassion, collaboration. The 3 C's.
And the fourth one might be speak to your community, not necessarily the community.
That's the fourth C, by the way, community. Yeah, you're right.
Fantastic. Sandy, once again, thank you for joining us for the podcast for today.
Thank you
For those
for
of you
inviting
looking
me.
to touch base with Sandy and find her book, because who doesn't need a little bit of power of community within their life? We will include that with our show notes and Amazon link for you to be able to go and find her book. If you are looking for community and listening to the podcast for the first time, please be invited to come and join us in the business community inside Facebook. And if you're wanting to dive into community a little bit more in the world of marketing and impact, I'd happily invite you into our Ideas, Impact and Marketing Circle community. And Clive, have you got a community that you can invite people through to?
Indeed, the Business Wisdom Vault is where people can find all manner of courses on how to get better in business, how to build better communities, how to have better conversations. At the end of the day, everything in business is about having a conversation.
That's the other C, communication. I tell my teachers it's the hardest thing, how to master it and keep working at it. That's great.
Okay, guys, thank you very much for joining us for another episode of the podcast. Please make sure that you like, subscribe, and you share this episode with someone who is looking to start their own school or their own community along the way. Until next time, I'm Linda Reed Aniver. We've had Sandy Breece with us, and Clive Aniver is my co-host, and I will catch up with you all again soon.
Thanks for listening to the Business Owners Podcast. We encourage you to connect with us on social media and join our community of business owners at businessbusinessbusiness.com.au.